So let me tell you what actually happened on April 11th, and I want you to understand why this specific moment changes everything about how this war ends. On the morning of April 11th, the USS Frank E. Peterson and the USS Michael Murphy, two Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, transited the Strait of Hormuz. This was the first time American warships had entered that passage since the war began on February 28th. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper announced it with one sentence. Today, we began the process of establishing a new passage. That sentence sounds procedural, calm, administrative, but what it actually means is the United States just made a move that Iran has been preparing to counter for decades. And here is what I want you to understand before anything else. This was not a victory lap. This was not a show of strength. This was a desperate, high-risk gamble by a military that quietly admitted it no longer has the ships it needs to actually finish the job. Now, before I walk you through exactly what is happening and why the IRGC's mine strategy has created a trap that nobody in Washington can cleanly escape from, let me explain why this moment is not what the headlines are telling you. Most of the coverage right now is framing this as America asserting control, America retaking Hormuz, Trump clearing the path, and that framing is completely wrong. What actually happened is much more complicated, much more dangerous, and has very specific implications for what comes next in this war that I do not see discussed anywhere else. So let me give you the three things you need to understand to see this situation clearly. First, what happened in Hormuz on April 11th and what it actually revealed about America's capability problem. Second, why Iran's mine strategy has done something that no missile or drone could accomplish. It has placed the United States in a position where every available option carries costs that are either militarily catastrophic or economically unsustainable. Third, what happens now? Because as of this morning, April 13th, the Islamabad talks have collapsed. Trump has just announced a naval blockade on all Iranian ports. Brent crude has surged past $102 a barrel as Asian markets open down across the board, and the window for a managed exit from this situation is getting narrower by the hour. Let us start with what actually happened on April 11th. The two destroyers entered the strait. CENTCOM turned the AIS transponder on as the ships cleared to the other side. Now, you do not turn AIS on by accident on a United States Navy destroyer. That is a deliberate decision. The signal being sent was clear. We passed through. We are visible. This happened. The problem is what happened next, because the IRGC was immediately on the radio. The transcript of that exchange is now public, recorded by a civilian vessel in the area and shared with the Wall Street Journal. The IRGC broadcast, "This is the last warning. This is the last warning." The American vessel responded that it was transiting in accordance with international law and intended to comply with ceasefire rules. Iran's official position afterward was that the destroyers had turned back after being confronted. American officials denied this. Multiple reports from Bloomberg and Axios, citing sources, indicate the destroyers did transit, crossed into the Arabian Gulf, then returned. A drone was allegedly launched in the direction of the American ships during the transit. The exchange was recorded. The ambiguity about exactly what happened was not an accident on either side. But here is the deeper problem. And this is the structural fact that should concern anyone paying close attention. Those two destroyers, as capable as they are, as expensive as they are at roughly $2 billion each, are not mine-clearing ships. They are guided missile destroyers, Aegis combat systems, anti-air warfare platforms. They can fight. They can track threats across hundreds of miles. What they cannot do is find and neutralize mines in the shallow, sediment-heavy, acoustically noisy waters of the Strait of Hormuz. And here is why that matters more than anything else in this story. The United States decommissioned all 4 of its Avenger-class minesweepers that were forward deployed in Bahrain in September 2025. September 2025, 6 months before Iran began mining Hormuz. The USS Ardent, the USS Dexterous, the USS Pioneer, the USS Chief, gone, retired. Those were the exact vessels designed and built for exactly this mission. The Navy chose to decommission them as a cost-saving measure while building towards unmanned systems as the future of mine countermeasures. The future is not here yet. The mines are, and the United States is now attempting a mine-clearing operation in one of the most dangerous and narrow waterways on Earth without the ships it was specifically designed to do that with. Admiral Daryl Caudle, the Chief of Naval Operations, put this plainly in USNI proceedings. Mine search and destruction, he wrote, is slow, deliberate work, and none of the available options, he added, performs well in a non-permissive environment. Non-permissive environment is military language for a place where the enemy is still shooting at you, or in this specific case, still laying mines while you try to find the ones already there. And this is the structural trap that Iran constructed, not through military genius, but through a strategy that has been documented, studied, and refined since the 1980s. A declassified 2009 CIA report noted explicitly that Iran had adopted a strategy in which a small number of mines, or even just the threat of mining, would be used to deter shipping, and that such a threat would be just as effective as an outright blockade. That assessment was written 17 years before this war started. Iran has been executing a documented plan, and Washington decommissioned the assets needed to counter it. Now let me tell you what the mines actually are, because this is not abstract. U.S. officials have confirmed Iranian Maham-3 and Maham-7 limpet mines in the Strait. These are domestically produced systems, some designs derived from Russian and Chinese architecture, modified for shallow water conditions. The IRGC deployed them using small boats capable of carrying 2 or 3 mines each. The problem is not just how many were laid, the problem is what happens to them after they are laid. The Persian Gulf has powerful tidal currents, heavy sedimentation, significant acoustic and magnetic interference from decades of commercial shipping. Mines partially bury themselves, they drift, they move. Trump claimed on Truth Social on April 11th that all 28 Iranian mine layer boats are lying at the bottom of the sea. The Navy has officially confirmed it destroyed 16 mine-laying vessels. No U.S. military official has corroborated the figure of 28. The gap between those two numbers is important because it tells you Iran may still have active mine-laying capability even now during the ceasefire. This is the detail that has not gotten nearly enough attention. Iran is reported to have continued laying mines in the Strait during the ceasefire itself. U.S. military intelligence, first reported by CNN, identified mining activity beginning around March 10th, and subsequent reporting through late March confirmed at least a dozen mines detected. The IRGC's own navigational advisory, published in April, acknowledged the mines exist without admitting responsibility. It told vessels to coordinate with the IRGC Navy and use alternative routes due to, and I am using their exact language here, the past war situation and possible anti-ship mines in the main traffic zone. The Iranian Ports and Maritime Organization published alternative shipping routes to avoid possible collisions with sea mines. That is a bureaucratic document acknowledging a minefield that Iran simultaneously claims is not its problem and not its creation. What this means is the entity that can tell you where the mines are is Iran. And Iran has stated through its parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, that the Strait of Hormuz situation will not return to its pre-war status. That statement was made March 17th. Nothing since then has changed that position. Iran's negotiating posture in Islamabad was consistent with it. Tehran has demanded the right to maintain influence over the strait as part of any settlement. It proposed levying transit tolls, reportedly around $2 million per ship, as compensation for war damages. This is not a demand from a losing side. This is the leverage position of a party that controls the key variable in the negotiation, which is whether the mines get removed or stay in place. Now let me connect this to the economics, because this is where the trap closes completely. The International Energy Agency's executive director described this situation as the greatest global energy security challenge in history. Not the greatest challenge of this decade, of history. 20% of global oil supply passes through Hormuz. 20% of global LNG. Over 30% of global urea, which is the primary ingredient in fertilizer, also transits this corridor. Brent crude surged past $102 a barrel on Monday morning as Asian markets opened following the collapse of the Islamabad talks. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures surged more than 8% on Sunday alone. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and multiple independent analysts have all placed the potential ceiling at anywhere from $170 to $200 per barrel if the strait remains closed through the second quarter. Now let me give you the numbers that actually matter for ordinary Americans. Gas prices in the United States have risen approximately $1.16 per gallon since the war began. Analysts warn prices could hit $5 per gallon nationally if Hormuz is not open by mid-April. That window is now. Jet fuel in North America has spiked 95% since the war started. Multiple airlines have already added fuel surcharges. The U.S. Postal Service, Amazon, FedEx have all implemented fuel surcharges. These are not projections. These are things that have already happened and are compounding. And it does not stop at the gas station. The strait carries phosphate, ammonium, sulfur, urea. These are not luxury goods. They are the raw materials of global food production. The British Food Policy Institute has warned of long-term increases in food prices due to the disruption in fuel and fertilizer markets. Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain, import over 80% of their caloric intake through Hormuz. By mid-March, 70% of the region's food imports were already disrupted. Retailers in those countries were airlifting staples. Consumer prices in the Gulf spiked between 40 and 120% in some categories. In Kuwait and Qatar, desalination plants, which provide 99% of drinking water, were struck. This is not a regional oil shock. This is a cascading system failure that gets worse the longer the strait stays closed. And Trump knows this, which is why what happened on Sunday night, April 12th, matters as much as what happened on April 11th. The Islamabad talks ran for nearly 21 hours. J.D. Vance flew to Pakistan specifically for this negotiation. The talks collapsed. The single point of genuine disagreement was nuclear. Iran would not accept permanent restrictions on its nuclear program. Trump announced on Truth Social, and I am summarizing here, that most points were agreed, but the one point that truly mattered, nuclear, was not. Within hours of that announcement, Trump ordered a naval blockade. His words, "The United States Navy will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz." He added that any Iranian forces who fire at U.S. forces or peaceful vessels would be, and this is his exact phrasing, blown to hell. Now let me give you the structural analysis of what a naval blockade of Hormuz actually means, because the framing of this as a show of strength obscures what is really happening. The IRGC responded within hours. Any military vessel approaching the strait, they said, would be dealt with harshly and decisively. The response did not come through diplomatic channels. It came through state-affiliated Fars News. The message being sent was that this is not a negotiating position. This is an operational order. And here is the constraint that no one in Washington is talking about publicly. A U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports is a fundamentally different operation from a mine-clearing transit through Hormuz. Blockading Iranian ports requires sustained presence of American naval vessels in confined waters inside the Persian Gulf within range of Iran's shore-based anti-ship missile batteries. Iran has extensive shore-based missile systems along its coastline, specifically designed for exactly this threat environment. The Gulf itself is shallow, it is narrow. It is, as U.S. officials themselves have described it, a kill box. That description came from inside the U.S. military. It was used to explain why American warships had been avoiding the strait for 6 weeks before April 11th. The same logic that made the strait a kill box for commercial shipping makes it a dangerous operating environment for U.S. warships running a blockade. Every day a destroyer sits in the Persian Gulf enforcing a blockade is a day it is within range of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drone swarms from the Iranian coastline. The asymmetry of cost that has defined this entire conflict does not change because the U.S. declared a blockade. A drone costs $50,000. An interceptor costs between $3 and $10 million. That exchange rate does not improve when American ships move closer to Iranian shores. There is also the India problem. India was one of the few countries granted safe passage through the strait by Iran. a single Indian-flagged LPG vessel crossed safely on April 11th, bringing the total of ships that have crossed to 9. India, a nation of 1,400,000,000 people, gets the majority of its oil through Hormuz. The Indian government has already prioritized household gas over commercial use to preserve reserves. Restaurants are shutting, industrial profits are being cut. If the U.S. blockade closes even the trickle of traffic that Iran has allowed for selected partners, India's energy crisis deepens immediately. China, Japan, South Korea all face the same math. China's Shanghai Composite fell, Japan's Nikkei fell, South Korea's Kospi fell. These are not abstract stock movements. They represent the world's largest import economies pricing in a scenario where the strait does not open on any timeline they can plan around. Now let me give you the structural reality of what the IRGC's mine strategy has actually accomplished, because I do not think this has been fully stated anywhere. Iran did not close Hormuz with its navy. Iran does not have a navy in the conventional sense, not anymore. 40 years of sanctions have seen to that. What Iran used was the cheapest, most strategically efficient weapon in its inventory. Mines, naval mines that have changed nothing about the military balance of this war, but have changed everything about its economic and political trajectory. The Stimson Center published an analysis last week that put it this way: the United States has a greater interest in reopening the strait than in prosecuting the war. That single sentence is the most important strategic observation about this conflict that I have read anywhere, because it describes a situation where the adversary has reversed the incentive structure of the conflict. The U.S. entered this war to degrade Iran's military capability, deny it a nuclear weapon, and secure regime change. Those were the stated objectives. The mine strategy has introduced a fourth variable. Every day the strait stays closed, the cost to the global economy, to American consumers, to Asian allies, to Gulf states, to the petrodollar system compounds. And that compounding cost creates political pressure on the administration that is completely independent of the military situation. Trump is now facing the 2026 midterm elections with gas prices approaching $5 a gallon, Asian markets falling, a failed round of negotiations, and a blockade announcement that his own allies are distancing themselves from. The United Kingdom announced it will not participate in Trump's planned Hormuz blockade. That statement from London came Sunday. France has not committed. The Gulf states that would be most directly affected by an Iranian military response to a blockade have not publicly endorsed it. Senator Mark Warner appeared on CNN and said he does not understand how blockading the strait is somehow going to push the Iranians into opening it. That is a Democratic senator. But the strategic confusion he is expressing is not a partisan position. It is the correct observation that declaring a blockade of a strait that Iran controls through mines and shore-based missiles, when the U.S. no longer has minesweepers in the theater, creates an operational situation with no clear path to the declared objective. Now, let me give you my specific assessment of where this is heading. The mine situation in Hormuz has created three simultaneous problems that have to be resolved, and they are not easy to resolve simultaneously. Problem one is physical. The mines exist. They have drifted. Iran cannot locate all of them. U.S. officials themselves told CNN that Iran has lost complete tracking of where a significant portion of the mines ended up. This is not American propaganda. This is the actual operational reality of mining a narrow waterway with strong tidal currents in a hurry. The IRGC laid the mines quickly using small boats without the infrastructure to track where all of them went. Clearing them requires specialized ships working slowly in a non-permissive environment. That work takes weeks to months under optimal conditions. The conditions are not optimal. Problem two is diplomatic. Iran has stated through every channel available that maintaining influence over the strait is its primary remaining leverage in any settlement. The Iranian parliament speaker said explicitly in March that the strait will not return to its pre-war status. This is not a negotiating bluff designed to extract concessions. It is a statement of strategic position. Iran knows that the moment it surrenders the strait completely, with no remaining control, no toll structure, no recognition of its presence in the waterway, it has given up the one thing that makes any settlement valuable to it. Asking Iran to simply open the strait without conditions is asking it to negotiate away its leverage before the negotiation is over. No government does that. Problem 3 is economic and political, and it is the one on the clock. Oil analysts at Reuters polled 8 different firms this week. Every single one projects the oil market moving into supply deficit in 2026, not supply tightness, deficit. An estimated 136 million barrels of crude oil and products are physically stranded in the Gulf right now. Clearing that backlog takes time even after the strait reopens. ANZ Research estimated that even under a constructive security scenario, only 2 to 3 million barrels per day could return to market in the first month. The global market was expecting a surplus of 1.6 million barrels per day this year before the war started. That forecast has been reversed by roughly 2.4 million barrels. The price trajectory from here depends entirely on whether and how quickly the strait reopens. And the mine situation means that timeline is not within American control. So here is what the IRGC strategy has actually accomplished. Iran did not need to defeat the United States militarily. It did not need to shoot down the aircraft carriers. It did not need to destroy the destroyers. It needed to change the incentive structure of the conflict so that the cost of continuing outweighed the cost of settling. The mines accomplished that, not because they are technically undefeatable. They are not. They can be cleared. But clearing them requires time, specialized equipment the U.S. does not have in theater, operational conditions that Iran can make permissive or non-permissive through the ceasefire it controls, and Iranian cooperation with locating the mines it can no longer fully track. Every one of those requirements places the initiative with Iran, not with the United States. And that is the strategic reversal that April 11th actually revealed, not the transit of 2 destroyers through the strait, but the public announcement that the U.S. is now beginning the slow, dangerous, months-long process of mine clearance in a waterway where it does not have the ships specifically designed for that mission, while Iran controls the ceasefire, controls the pace of diplomacy, controls the information about where the remaining mines are, and has made clear it intends to maintain presence in the strait permanently. The blockade announcement changes the pressure, but not the operational problem. Iran cannot be blasted into removing mines that it cannot fully locate itself, and the economic clock is running for the American consumer, the Asian importer, and the European industry simultaneously. The question this situation forces is not whether America wins or loses the military campaign. 6 weeks of strikes have significantly degraded Iran's military capability. That much is not in dispute. The question is whether America can convert military degradation into a political settlement before the economic cost of a closed Hormuz produces a reckoning at home that forces a settlement on worse terms than what was available before the mines went in. And that window is not weeks, it is days. The same oil industry executives that came out of the CERAWeek conference in Houston said the strait needs to be open by mid-April, or the disruptions get significantly worse. Mid-April is now. The blockade announcement has moved markets in the wrong direction this morning. The mine clearing operation is underway with the wrong ships. The Islamabad talks have failed. A 3rd aircraft carrier and thousands of Marines are still inbound. And the IRGC's radio broadcast of "This is the last warning" is sitting in a publicly available Wall Street Journal report, timed and transcribed, a permanent document of the moment when Iran's asymmetric strategy forced the most powerful navy in the world to announce on a Monday morning that it is, in Admiral Brad Cooper's exact words, still in the process of establishing a new passage. That process, whatever its outcome, is not going to be quick. It is not going to be clean. And the world's most consequential choke point will not return to what it was before February 28th. The only question left is which version of what comes next the parties can agree to accept. And right now, based on everything that happened this week, neither side appears ready to answer that question.